Good evening, and right before we dive into the main topic, I wanted to quickly mention that earlier today, we published a super spicy episode of Facts Matter over on Epoch TV, exposing how, unbeknownst to almost all Americans, there are quite literally thousands of food items on our store shelves that contain ingredients made using nanotechnology. And the reason that we don't know about this is because for over the past 20 years now, the FDA has not required companies to list these nanoparticles on the ingredients labels, even though there are no long-term studies showing their effects on our health. If you'd like to check out that episode in its entirety, the link will be right there at the very top of the description box. And now, let's dive into the main topic of today's discussion, which has to do with the city of Uvalde, Texas, the unfortunate site of a mass shooting at an elementary school which has left 21 people dead, including 19 children. However, what I'd like to focus on today is the timeline of events leading up to the death of the actual shooter, because there's something which is not quite adding up in terms of how long it took for the police to neutralize the assailant. Because according to the official accounting of events, what happened is that the shooter, who for your reference is an 18-year-old named Salvador Ramos, whose picture, by the way, I refuse to show in our program because I believe he's already gotten enough publicity. Regardless, though, according to the official account, the initial official account, he gets to the school, crashes his vehicle in a ditch, he has some kind of an encounter with a guard, he then enters the school and begins killing children, and then, only a full hour later, is the shooter killed by the police. And so the big obvious question here is why exactly did it take so long for the police to neutralize him? And so in order to set the initial stage for you properly, let's start by listening to a clip from CNN wherein one of their hosts interviews Mr. Anthony Gonzalez. He's the congressman from Uvalde, he's a Republican, and during the interview, which for your reference was conducted 2 days ago, he gives an official account of what took place. Take a listen. And by the way, I sped up the video just a little bit so we can get through it faster.
So I have two questions about this, and maybe you can clear this up. How was the gunman able to get into the school if the resource officer had engaged with him but no gunfire was exchanged? How did he get in?
Yeah, so it started at his home. You know, he tragically shoots his grandmother, and then he gets in a vehicle and he drives to the school. It's less than a mile away, so it's really right around the corner. And as he comes to the school, he wrecks. He kind of goes into this ditch, and it's when he got into that ditch is when law enforcement was called and engaged. You know, so that's part of the initial contact. There was no firing that I understand. He actually enters through the back of one of the buildings, through the teacher parking lot, if you will. He immediately enters one room, and then essentially that's when the police, the law enforcement officer, because it's not just police officers, it's sheriffs, it's Border Patrol agents. I mean, everybody came together. People are not even in this county, and they basically cornered him into one room. There are hundreds of children in that school. Part of the story, there's a lieutenant named Javier Martinez engages this assailant. He takes fire. He actually was wounded. You know, it's tragic to see so many children be murdered, but this could have been a whole lot worse. People like Javier Martinez and Chief Arredondo, they saved hundreds of lives. So that's where you see him get pinned in.
Well, he was pinned, but just to be clear, he's pinned down or pinned in a classroom where he was slaughtering kids, right? I mean, is that what you mean by pinned down?
I understand that he went in that classroom and he begins to fire. He begins to murder people, starting with that wonderful teacher that was defending her students, and he doesn't stop. The police officer actually engages him. Javier Martinez engages him. He kind of takes fire through the door, and then it stops, and he barricades himself in. That's where there's kind of a lull in the action. All of it, I understand, lasted about an hour, but this is where there's kind of a 30-minute lull. They feel as if they got him barricaded in. The rest of the students in the school are now leaving. You know, they're trying to get people out to safety, and this assailant is barricaded in. It's moments later, or minutes later, when they breach it, and then ultimately a Border Patrol agent is the one that neutralizes this assailant.
All right. It still seems like a lot of time that the police were outside the classroom and the shooter was inside the classroom where there were kids.
Now, since that interview was aired, more details have been revealed about what actually happened, which actually contradicts the earlier statements made by Mr. Gonzalez. To start with, it appears that the shooter did not just crash his vehicle and go directly into the school building. Instead, according to new reports, what actually happened was that he stayed outside of the school for 12 full minutes, firing shots at the funeral home across the street. Here's how the updated timeline of events was broken down by the Wall Street Journal. Quote, Ramos shot his grandmother Tuesday morning and drove her truck to Robb Elementary School, crashing the vehicle into a nearby ditch at 11:28 a.m. He then began shooting at people at a funeral home across the street, prompting a 911 call reporting a gunman at the school at 11:30. Ramos climbed a chain-link fence about 8 feet high onto school grounds and began firing before walking inside unimpeded at 11:40. The first police arrived on the scene at 11:44 and exchanged gunfire with Ramos, who locked himself in a fourth-grade classroom. There, he killed the students and teachers. Furthermore, although initially the police said that an armed school officer confronted the shooter when he first arrived on school grounds, that appears to not have been the case, as we just read. That's because just yesterday, Mr. Escalon, who is the regional director of the Department of Public Safety down in southern Texas, he said that in reality, no one encountered the shooter when he arrived at the school. Here is his exact quote: "There was not an officer readily available and armed." Furthermore, the shooter was able to walk right into the school building because reportedly the door to the school was unlocked, after which he went into the classroom, barricaded himself in, and began his massacre. And this is where, in terms of the police response, things begin to break down a bit, because after the shooter began his rampage, it took somewhere between 40 minutes and 1 full hour for him to eventually be shot by a Border Patrol agent. And it was in this interim period that the shooter was able to kill 21 people, all within that one classroom that he barricaded himself into. And so what exactly happened? Well, according to the parents who were there on site, who rushed to the school in order to save their kids, the police officers were unwilling to break into the classroom to neutralize the shooter. Here was, in fact, how the Associated Press described what was happening outside of the school during this actual incident. Quote, "Frustrated onlookers urged police officers to charge into the Texas elementary school. Javier Cazares, whose 4th grade daughter, Jacqueline Cazares, was killed in the attack, said he raced to the school when he heard about the shooting, arriving while police were still gathered outside the building. Upset that police were not moving in, he raised the idea of charging into the school with several other bystanders. He was quoted as yelling, 'Let's just rush in because the cops aren't doing anything like they are supposed to.' And indeed, according to video footage from that day, well, it shows that many police officers did indeed stay outside of the school, kept the parents from rushing in, and even detained at least one parent. Here was some of the footage that was shot right outside of the school grounds.
We're taking care of shit. He ain't done yet. She dead. He's not good. Y'all shouldn't fucking treat that motherfucker like that. What the fuck you doing to him? Let him go. ¿Qué me vas a disparar, güey? You're shooting.
Man, y'all can't be like that, man. Y'all can't be like that when there's people.
Yes, I do. Get across the street. Because I'm having to deal with you. Get across the street. Get across the street. We have other stuff to do.
We're gonna back up, or you're gonna walk into that gate and get him.
You gotta get violent with us. Go get violent with that
Fighting with
motherfucker,
the one that has the rifle here.
Go get violent with him. This motherfucker with 20 motherfucking guns. One fucking gun.
You know that they're kids, right? They're little kids. They don't know how to defend themselves. 6-year-old kids in there. They don't know how to defend themselves from a shooter.
Furthermore, it appears that while this was happening, while these parents were being held back, several police officers might have entered the school in order to save their own children. Evidence, for instance, by this interview that was shot right here.
And we've also heard word that a Border Patrol agent was struck with gunfire, a few officers shot. We've heard that some law enforcement officers actually went into school to get their kids out. Can you talk about that?
Right, so what we do know, Vanessa, right now that there was some police officers, families trying to get their children out of the school because it was an active shooter situation right now. It's a terrible situation right now. And of course, just as we mentioned, the loss of life, it's just terrible. It's a terrible tragedy now that took place.
And then eventually, about 30 minutes after the shooter actually barricaded himself into the classroom, an elite member of the Border Patrol agency arrived at the scene, broke into the classroom, exchanged fire with the shooter, and eventually killed him. But of course, not before he had the opportunity to kill 21 people, including 19 children, all inside of that one room. And so the big question that remains is why exactly did the police play it this way? Which will very likely be investigated over the next several weeks, and it already has people calling to defund the police, such as by this hashtag, which was trending on Twitter right after the police response was made known. However, according to this new report, well, it looks like defunding the police might actually be the wrong approach. And the answer to why they responded in the way that they did might actually have to do with a lack of proper equipment. In fact, according to sources that spoke under the condition of anonymity with Breitbart News, it appears that it was a lack of ballistic shields which stopped the agents from breaking into that room. Here's specifically what their report said, quote, Multiple law enforcement sources revealed to Breitbart, Texas, that part of the delay in stopping the barricaded elementary school shooter hinged on a deadly mix of the shooter's defensive tactics and the lack of needed gear. Specifically, officers lacked the ballistic shield needed to enter the classroom with the barricaded shooter. Attempting to breach the door without a ballistic shield would have resulted in certain death for the officers, which could have provided the shooter with the officers' weapons and ammunition. There's also the possibility that the shooter could have taken police communications gear off the officers' bodies, thereby giving the shooter the ability to listen to police movement and plans. And then another Border Patrol agent who's quoted in this article, who was actually part of the tactical team who eventually shot the shooter, well, he added this, quote, "If the subject can effectively take out an officer, he gains one more weapon. More loaded magazines and law enforcement communications are instantly compromised, allowing the suspect to know what the next plan of attack is." And then furthermore, another official who spoke with Breitbart for the story, he said that for one, small-town police departments lack the necessary equipment due to funding issues, and that secondly, at least in his opinion, well, the premise that police officers on the scene were too afraid to enter is false. Here's specifically what he said, quote, "Our officers had their own children in the building, one of whom was killed. We wanted to end this as badly as anyone else. To think that we would stand around and let children die by choice is unconscionable for our officers right now during their time of mourning." And so naturally, this is a continually unfolding story with more details coming out every single day. In fact, perhaps after the weekend, we will have a clearer picture of what actually took place here, so that at the very least, police departments across the entire country can learn from this horrible tragedy and hopefully plan ahead in their own jurisdictions. If you'd like to read any reference material that we went through in today's episode, I will throw all of it down into the description box below this video, which is right below that like button, which I hope you take a moment to smash so that the YouTube algorithm will be quite literally forced to share this video out to ever more people. And also, if you haven't smashed that subscribe button, I hope you do as well. That way you can get this type of honest news content delivered directly into your YouTube feed every single weekday. Now, as I mentioned earlier in today, sorry, what's this? Of course it's secure, because we use the Sekur app, which is the sponsor of today's episode, as well as an awesome email and message service provider that actually cares about your privacy. Now listen, it's no big secret that our data is being mined and remined all the time. In fact, there was a recent study that was published in the year 2020, which found that 155 million Americans, likely including you and me, have suffered some form of data breach. And frankly, that's only what's publicly known. However, all those past problems with privacy issues and data mining, well, that can be an issue of the past, because moving forward, you can use the Sekur app, which both your messages, your emails, and your phone calls can remain private. That's because they have their servers and their data centers located in Switzerland instead of in the US or China or Russia. And why does that matter? Because Switzerland has the strictest data privacy laws in the entire world, and they are not subject to the intrusive Cloud Act. Now, what I love the most about the Sekur app is that they don't collect my data, they don't mine my data, they don't mine the data and phone numbers of my friends and family. Everything is private. And best of all, at least in my opinion, this does not work with your big tech email provider just because it is not secure. And so check it out. You can head on over to Sekur.com, and if you use promo code Roman, you can get 25% off. And frankly, their rates are not even that expensive. It only starts with $5 for the messenger and $10 for the email and messenger combo. And best of all, they offer a 7-day free trial. And now, as I mentioned at the very beginning of this program, earlier today, we published an exclusive episode of Facts Matter over on Epoch TV, detailing how, unbeknownst to almost all Americans, there are quite literally thousands of food items made using nanotechnology ingredients over on our store shelves. Here's a trailer. Right now, unbeknownst to almost all Americans, thousands of the food items on our store shelves actually contain within them ingredients that are made using nanotechnology. And the reason they do this is because over the past 30 years or so, scientists have discovered that by adding these tiny little components, they were able to make our food more colorful, brighter, creamier, crunchier, and they were even able to keep it fresher for longer. However, according to more and more consumer protection groups, as well as different health experts, there appears to be a catch, which is that while these nanoparticles can provide a myriad of benefits, they might come at a price. And that price is our health, which might be getting compromised without our even knowing it. Because while countries like Canada, France, and the EU in general are banning these foods, well, here in America, the FDA not only allows them, but even further, at this very moment, companies are not even required to list these nanoparticles on their ingredients label, meaning that you don't even know that you're ingesting them. Let's go through it all together. If you'd like to watch that exclusive episode, you can do so over on Epoch TV, which is our awesome no censorship video platform. The link will be right there at the very top of the description box. I hope you click on it. I hope you check out that video, and I hope that you subscribe, because your subscription not only allows you to watch that awesome video, but also it supports all the journalism that we do here at the Epoch Times. Again, that link will be right there at the very top of the description box. And then until next time, I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free.